Visual literacy sets the tempo for the digital age. And just like the ability to use word processors goes hand in hand with traditional or textual literacy, fluency with image editing technology is quickly becoming a core component of visual literacy. This tutorial will serve as a basic primer for anyone looking to get started creating graphics in Adobe Illustrator. I'll walk you through a typical asset development project, demonstrating a typical workflow, essential tools, and some third-party resources that will make your job a little easier. By the end of the tutorial, you'll be able to create a batch of custom vector assets that you can use to liven up your designs. So let's get started. In this introductory lesson, we're going to learn how to create a document and set up the artboards and layers. With Adobe Illustrator open, click on Create New. Adobe provides some presets that will automatically match your settings to a variety of devices and applications. Click on Mobile and then choose iPhone 8, 7, or 6. You can see that the width and height have been changed to match the dimensions of an iPhone 8, and we can always change that later. Give your file a descriptive name. For our exercise, we're going to be creating assets for a healthy remote work flyer. Next, expand the advanced settings. Notice that color mode is set to RGB color. Since we told Illustrator we would be designing for a digital screen, RGB was chosen automatically. If we are designing for print, you should always use CMYK, but we're going to use RGB for this project. Next, set the raster effects to high 300 ppi, and then click on Create. Before we get started, make sure your workspace is set to Essentials using the drop-down menu in the upper right-hand corner. First, try moving the workspace around by holding down the spacebar, then clicking and dragging anywhere in the workspace. Next, practice zooming in and out by holding the Alt key down while scrolling up and down. Notice that it zooms in or out at the location of your cursor. If you don't have a scroll wheel, you can activate the zoom tool on your cursor by pressing the Z key. Left-click to zoom in at your cursor's location, or hold Alt and left-click to zoom out. You can press Ctrl-0 to reset your artboard so that it's centered and fills the screen. As you might have guessed by now, this white space is an artboard, and this is where your designs will go. You can use the gray space for brainstorming, but only what's within the bounds of the artboard will go into our final product. Since we're going to be creating a batch of assets, we'll need an artboard for each graphic, and a quick way to do that is to duplicate the existing artboard. To edit your artboards, click on the Artboard tool at the bottom of the toolbar on the left edge of the screen. Zoom out by holding the Alt key and scrolling down. Then move the workspace to the left by holding down the spacebar and dragging to the left. With the Artboard tool active, Illustrator will treat your artboards like objects, which can be moved around, resized, and even duplicated. Duplicating objects is a must-know function, and Illustrator makes it super easy. You can duplicate an object by holding down the Alt key, then clicking and dragging the object to a second location. By default, Illustrator attempts to keep the object lined up as you move it. But if you're having trouble keeping it centered, you can hold down the Shift key to lock it so that it will only move along one path. Let go of the left click before you let go of the Alt key, and you'll duplicate the object. You can tell that the second artboard is selected because of the dashed line that appears around it. You can select a different artboard by clicking on it. And if you hold Shift, you can click to select multiple artboards at once. Use Shift-click to select both artboards, then use Alt-click and drag to duplicate them. Now we actually need our artboards to be a little shorter than this. With an object selected, you can resize it by dragging any of the handles on the bounding box. Click and drag the top center handle to resize the first artboard. Then click the second artboard to select it, and notice that as you resize this one, a guide shows up, snapping it into place when it's at the exact same height as the first. However, there's a quicker way to do this. Undo those last two changes by pressing Ctrl-Z twice, or Command-Z if you're on a Mac. Then select all four artboards by using Shift-click. Now the bounding box provides a single handle to resize all four artboards at once. Just make them a little bit shorter. That looks good to me. And if you have an exact size in mind, you can go over to the Properties panel and use the Transform section. If I type 900 into the height value and press Enter, My artboards will be resized to 900 pixels. After you set up your artboards, you should set up your layers. Click on the Layers tab all the way at the top right-hand corner of the screen. By default, Illustrator's layers are small and difficult to see. You can adjust that by clicking on the hamburger menu and choosing Panel Options. Set the row size to large and click OK. You can create a new layer by clicking on the button at the bottom of the Layers panel that looks like a plus symbol inside of a box. Keep clicking until you've got 4 layers in total, 1 for each artboard. Notice that each layer has its own unique color, which is used to indicate when a selected object is placed on that layer. If you double-click on the layer, you can change the layer options, including the name of the layer and the indicator color. Next, go ahead and save your document by hitting Ctrl+S or Command+S on a Mac. You'll be prompted with some extra options, but for now, you can overlook these and just hit OK. That's it for part 1, and while it may not seem like much right now, keeping your workspace organized is key when working with graphics. So give yourself a pat on the back because you've accomplished a lot already. In part 2 of the tutorial, we'll learn how to set up a color palette and find, download, and import open source assets.